But let's stick on fasting. Somebody wanting to use that as a tool to improve metabolic health. First of all, who's that right for? And then we'll walk our way into a prolonged fast, starting with somebody having their last bite of food. And let's extend that over a number of days and talk about some of the different benefits they would get.
So intermittent fasting to me should be the default lifestyle. And now I'm just talking 14, 16, 18 hours. Because a lot of people, when we're taught to eat 3 meals plus 3 snacks, most people will start eating the first thing they do in the morning and the last thing before going to bed. So they basically have 8 hours without food. So, and here we're talking like we started out with the pantry. We put things in the pantry, but we're not allowing any time to take things out. So even just going from 8 hours to 12 hours is a big improvement. Okay, it increases our ability to create turnover in that pantry. And then if we have a metabolic issue, now we want to try to increase that. If we can do 14 or 16 or 18 hours, now we're allowing the body to break down more of that stored energy. We're allowing insulin to drop because we're going longer without food. And there's a difference because we're always making insulin. There's something called fasting insulin. So we're always releasing a little bit of insulin, and that's just to kind of cope with our gluconeogenesis. So you're between meals, your liver is still kicking out a little bit of glucose to maintain that basic level between meals. And we need just a smidgen of insulin for that. That's the fasting insulin. But when you eat a meal, and let's say like before you went low carb, your meal was 100 grams of carbs or 150. Now that's a mountain of carbs that your body has to process through. So in your bloodstream at any given time, you have about 3 grams. You have about a half a teaspoon of blood glucose. So, I mean, that's a tiny, tiny, tiny bit. And now you're throwing in 150 grams. That's a mountain. So that's a lot of insulin that your body has to produce to process through that meal. So that's why fasting is so powerful. The longer you do it, the more insulin is allowed to drop because there's longer between these mountains. And of course, if you eat low carb, now it's not a mountain, it's just a tiny little hill, little ant hill. So the longer you go, the more you allow that insulin to drop. And this is good for anybody. Like I said, I think that should be the default lifestyle. And I think that's how humans work physiologically. I think 1 or 2 meals a day. I typically do 1 larger and 1 smaller. And it just depends on what's going on. Sometimes I get busy, I go out somewhere and I don't eat, and then it's just 1 meal a day. But once people get used to this, almost without exception, they'll say, I don't understand why I ever did anything else. Because it's so easy, it's so natural, it feels like this is what I was supposed to do. There's no effort, it's just what I do. So that's kind of the first part. Then I think for people who are insulin resistant, they can change it up a little bit. I think they should have a minimum of a 16-hour window. So that means you eat during 8 hours. One or two, or well, 1 would be more, but let's say 2 or 3 meals, I think you can eat within an 8-hour period. But then it's going to depend on the person. Like, what does that do for you? Is your body changing? Are you losing weight? Is your glucose, is your insulin, are your triglycerides dropping based on that? If not, you got to do more. But even so, I think it's a good thing to change things up. And what a lot of people do with success is they'll skip a day. And that's what I call the 42-hour fast. So if you eat at 6 in the evening and you go to bed, you wake up the next day, and then you skip that whole day. When you wake up the next morning, you have 36 hours if you get up at 6. But then, since you're already used to intermittent fasting, you don't need to have breakfast right away. So if you wait till lunch, there's your 42 hours. And now that's a significant time span that is easier to do than most people think. Like, if you just don't really feel it too much, like don't notice too much how you feel, just assume you're going to go a day without eating, then once you wake up, you're almost there. And you have, in this 42 hours, you have 2 nights that make it really easy. Because when you're sleeping, you're not really paying attention to it. So it's like a third of this is automatic. So with those 42 hours, you are getting a lot of different benefits, a lot of metabolic benefits.
Talk about some of the benefits of intermittent fasting, and then some of the additional benefits extending out to 42 hours.
So if you're low carb or ketogenic, then you're making ketones already. And if you're not, by the time you get into 24, 36 hours, you are making ketones for sure, pretty much regardless of what you ate. But if you ate low carb before you started, you're going to be in a deeper level of ketosis. And ketones are brain fuel. So not everyone, but a lot of people will feel better because they're fueling their brain better during the state of ketosis. But ketones are also signaling molecules, and they signal against inflammation. They help lower inflammation in the body. So the ketone part is one aspect. Then the insulin part, like the longer you go, the more you allow it to drop. And for a lot of people, they'll find with a low carb or keto that their insulin might go from 20 to 12, but then it sort of plateaus. Well, these 42-hour periods are a great tool to break through those plateaus. And a lot of people will find that they'll get these breakthroughs, and they'll find themselves at lower levels. And it's something that's not too hard to do, like once a week. Pick a day that works for you and say, I'm not going to eat on that day. And then there you have your 42-hour fast. And the thing that we mentioned briefly here is autophagy. And that's a process. Autophagy means self-eating. And that means when you don't eat food from the outside, your body starts looking for, where are the resources inside the body? Where can I find my stuff? And so we have plenty of energy. We have, even a very skinny person has enough fat on their body to live safely for several months. And carbs we don't need. So the big challenge, the big deficiency during a fast is protein. And protein becomes this precious thing that your body, the purpose of autophagy is that everything starts revolving around protein, about economizing with protein. And you do have some resources in the body that you can go after better. So the body gets better at recycling. It upregulates the cleanup crew, if you will, and it starts scouring the body for these things. And some of these are things you want to get rid of that helps your health. So you have dying cells, right? Unhealthy cells that are on their last breath. You have cell debris. you have residue from bacteria. And all of these contain a little bit of protein that you can now go and recycle. And one of the interesting things is that your brain, there's something called a blood-brain barrier. So the brain basically has a whole different circulatory system. It's got its own physiology, basically. A lot of things don't cross this blood-brain barrier, and bacteria don't cross. You don't really have an immune system the way we think of it, right? A lot of stuff doesn't get across. And one of the few ways that you have to clean up in the brain is autophagy. So one of the best things you could do if you have traumatic brain injury, if you hit your head, if you have a concussion, the absolute best thing you can do is to fast, because that jumpstarts that autophagy and helps clean up the damage after that brain injury. But it does help the whole body. So you start basically cleaning up better. And there's some wonderful anti-aging benefits, and autophagy, you can clean up even beginning cancers. The immune system upregulates. So there's a lot of this cleanup activity that has health benefits. And autophagy, really, it's a gradual thing, but it really doesn't kick in at all until 12 hours. And that's like, if you're in ketosis, then it's just like a smidgen after 12 hours. After 18, it's more significant, but it really starts kicking in after like 24 to 36. And then I believe after about 4 to 5 days is where you hit your maximum level of autophagy, and then it sort of levels off from there. But at 42 hours, you get very significant autophagy.
And under that umbrella of autophagy, would mitophagy be under that?
Yes. You're talking mitochondria? Or?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. And I don't know a ton about mitochondria, but they're becoming, they're raising more and more interest, because they are everything in our bodies depend on energy, and mitochondria are the things that produce our energy. And anything that benefits autophagy, like you said, myotophagy, we start breaking down dysfunctional mitochondria more so, and we're upregulating the rate of production. So we're basically getting younger and healthier and better performing mitochondria.
So when we get to this phase, autophagy, you mentioned the protein recycling. You've also talked about the muscle wasting. Are those connected? If somebody's on a longer fast, I just want to make sure I'm clear on this. Would that recycling and autophagy keep the muscle loss at bay?
There's some different opinions on this. Some of the people who did early research, they said that the body is so good at preserving protein, like we'll break down other things first. We'll break down fat and for energy, and long before we break down protein. So you would have to go like 2 weeks or more before there was any threat to the muscle. But then some other people more recently have said that no, it doesn't take that long. But I don't think you want to overdo it. I don't know that there's enough research and definitive knowledge. But I think it's totally safe and beneficial to do fasts up to 3 to 4 days, and that you could do those if you're metabolically healthy. I think you can do those every 6 months or maybe even quarterly. And if you are metabolically unhealthy, if you have type 2 diabetes or even cancer or something like that, I think that the benefits offset the downside. And I think you could do them even a whole lot more, like every month or so, because you're getting tremendous benefit. And I think the muscle wasting is minimal. One thing that I mentioned that high intensity interval training is one of the things that will produce the most growth hormone. Well, the only other thing that will produce more is fasting. Okay. And the reason is that human growth hormone is muscle sparing. So the body knows this. It says, hey, we're not eating, we're going into autophagy. We want to prevent muscle wasting. So let's crank that growth hormone through the roof and spare those muscles. So I don't know. I don't have the exact answer. I don't think that we need to be very afraid of it. I think 42-hour fasts are totally fine. And I think up to 3, 4, 5 days now and then are still fine.
Do you know at what point human growth hormone starts to spike?
I think that follows autophagy very closely. I think I researched that for a video, but I don't remember. But I would say that it probably starts kicking in significantly around 18 hours, just like autophagy. And I think it follows that curve.
What about other autophagy boosters? I know exercise is one. I believe there's supplements that can help. Anything in that realm you can share?
Not really. I've seen some things, but I don't remember.
During a fast, whether it be intermittent or longer, what do you personally, or somebody that you're helping through that, what can they drink?
Water is the number one thing. And I know there's some talk about dry fasting, but I think that's a very questionable way to go. I think the body depends on water, and the longer we go without, the more we can start compromising some of the other benefit. I don't really see a reason to do it. So drink plenty of water. If you like black tea or black coffee or green tea or herb tea, all of those are fine. And then I would strongly recommend people to do electrolytes. And I kind of designed an electrolyte for that purpose because it's very broad, but it also has some zinc and manganese in it to support some immune aspects, some metabolic benefits, and even some gut healing. Some of the things that can take place. And what happens when you fast is, especially if you're insulin resistant, then insulin tricks kidneys into retaining sodium. So when you're fasting, your insulin drops, and now your body isn't used to controlling sodium that way. The way it controls sodium changes, and you're going to lose electrolytes, primarily sodium, but you're going to lose some other ones as well. And a lot of the things that happen to people when they start keto, when they start fasting, they get brain fog, they get nausea, they get tired. Most of those things are due to loss of electrolytes. And normally, like my product, I made it so you could take 1 scoop a day. If you're working out, if you're sweating, you could take 2. But if you're fasting, you should take 3 or 4 scoops a day. And that also basically gives you all the potassium that you would need. And there's a lot of talk about sodium, and the guidelines have been restricting sodium forever, even though we need it. The biggest problem is the ratio that all the processed foods have plenty of sodium, but they're totally stripped of potassium and magnesium. And the kidneys are designed to process these as couples. Like there's something called a sodium-potassium pump. It's one of the most interesting and most powerful things we have in our bodies. The sodium potassium pump uses 30-40% of all the energy in your body. All the calories, all the energy you use, 30-40% goes into shuttling sodium and potassium back and forth. But in doing that, it shuffles sodium one way and potassium the other, and it changes the electrical potential of the cell membrane. So when your brain is sending signals, sodium rushes one way, and then the sodium potassium pump has to pump it the other way to re-establish that electric potential. And this uses, like I said, 30-40% of all our energy. But the point is, the kidneys use the same sodium potassium pump, and it uses all the different mechanisms are coupled. So it's never one thing going by itself. So when we have a ton of sodium in our diet without the other minerals, now we create an imbalance, and the kidney can't properly regulate these because it doesn't have the counterbalance, so to speak. So it's not that we need to cut back on sodium, really, it's that we need to make sure we get all the electrolytes. And during a fast, if you take enough electrolytes of a well-balanced brand, a lot of them hardly have any potassium, or they basically have salt. That's it. So they're kind of like processed food. But if you take one that's well-balanced, now you're helping your body during that fast to maintain proper levels. And I've had several people say that it's like, I've had a hard time fasting. When I did it with electrolytes, it was a breeze.
What's the ratio of your product?
So I have potassium is the heaviest. So I formulated it to where most people are going to put salt on their food. So you're going to get some sodium anyway. So during a fast, I would say add some extra sodium. I think I put 75 milligrams of sodium from pink salt. So you get a little bit of the trace minerals. I put 600 milligrams of potassium. And then I put, I believe 250 milligrams of sodium from sea salt, 75 milligrams of calcium. And that's also important that it's not calcium carbonate, because that's basically chalk. It's useless. When you take a calcium supplement, you want it to be ionizable, right? Because that's the active form that supports your immune system and circulates in your bloodstream. And calcium lactate is the only one that's easily convertible to ionizable form. Then I have 110, something like that, of magnesium. And then I have a little bit of zinc and manganese, and both of those are chelated, meaning bound to a protein rather than a mineral salt, metal salt. It's more food-like, and it helps absorption. And then I also have a trace mineral mix, so you get a little bit of all the trace minerals as well to support you. And I mean, I spent some time coming up with that, and I think that's what the body needs when you're looking for. And I kept it does if that's all you do, it doesn't have enough sodium. So you want to add in a little bit.
So it sounds like people not using your electrolyte, the ratio of electrolytes is going to be off. They're going to be getting too much sodium. If somebody's in that position, what signs will they notice?
That I don't know. They might see higher blood pressure. It just depends on so many different factors, like where they are before and what else are they eating. If they're fasting and they're taking a ton of it, I think they're still kind of cleaning out their body enough that they probably wouldn't notice the symptoms. The first mineral you're losing is sodium. So that is the most important to replenish. It's like if you're only doing one thing, it should be sodium. But long term, that's not a great idea, because it's really the other stuff that you're missing more.
Since you made it to the end of this clip, I know you're going to love the full episode. Click here to watch. I'll see you over there.
Basically, everything else you can think of gets worse with insulin resistance. That's why it's the #1 health problem. And we've never seen anything like it, where the